All right. So good to see you. We have with us today a really special guest we're super excited about. This is Alex Lewin, author of Real Food Fermentation. Just did an updated one that hasn't even gotten into me yet. And a Kombucha, Kefir and Beyond fermented beverages book, which I apparently loaned out. So you'll get to have to find that in the resources. Alex, we're super glad to have you today. Thank you for joining us.
I'm really happy to be here, Lindsay.
So
the magic of the internet. Yeah.
Yes, best part, all three different parts of the country, 2 different time zones, hanging out together, which is awesome.
Yeah, so as you guys probably know by now, fermentation is one of Lindsay's and my favorite topics. So having Alex here is a real treat because it is super fun to talk to other people who nerd out on gut microbes like we do. And I think we've both adopted some of Alex's recipes as like household staples over the past few years. So we're looking forward to letting him share his love of fermentation with you.
For sure.
That makes me very happy to hear.
It's actually a good week for it because we're doing kind of explore experiment this week. So for a lot of people, fermentation is something new and sometimes a little like weird or scary. So it's a great week to introduce the concept to people who haven't tried fermentation before. And maybe our talk together can show people that it isn't actually as scary and it's actually quite fun and exciting. So they can give it a shot this week since that's our theme.
Totally.
So it was fun in looking at some of your stuff earlier. One of the recipes that we used in our sauerkraut and kombucha course, or our kombucha and kimchi course, you said is one of your favorite recipes. Yep, one of your favorite recipes in the book. I told you it's early here. One of the recipes that you said was your favorite in the book was that Carolina slaw, and that was one we borrowed and cited you for in our courses because that was one of our favorites that we had come across in that category. Something new, something a little different. So it was really fun to see somebody doing something really cool with that.
Yeah, I've actually used that one at some health retreats too, and they all love it. It's a good one.
Great. I'm glad you like it. That's one of my fancier recipes. I mean, in my books, my goal with the books and like with my fermentation work and all that is to lower the bar, like to remove barriers to entry for people wanting to ferment. So, I try to go for the least weird equipment possible. Like if you have a knife and a jar, that's pretty much, there are all sorts of fancy fermentation airlocks and things that you could use, but you really don't need to. And, I don't want people to think that there's this big thing you have to do before you can start fermenting. So yeah, that's one of my fancier recipes because it has a bunch of ingredients in it, but a lot of mine are like 3 ingredients. Some of the other books out there are more sort of cookbooky in that they have, here are all the fabulous different variations of kraut and kimchi you can make. And I didn't do very much of that. And also there's a lot of opportunity to just dig things up on the internet if you want to know what, ideas for fancy krauts or kombucha flavors. And also you can just look on the ingredients of, like, if there's one you see at the store that sounds interesting, like your curry radish kraut or whatever, you can just look at the list of ingredients and reverse engineer it. So yeah, I chose to go more for the sort of fundamental basic recipes, and then once people are comfortable with those, counting on them to do other things to them too. But the Carolina slaw was one that I developed because I had this insight that I claim that none of this as sort of original insight because so many people fermented before me, but in the east coast of the US you have this vinegar slaw that's very different from the creamy slaw that you have in a lot of other places. And I'm like, oh well, it's sour, it was probably fermented, can we make this with fermentation without adding vinegar? And yeah, very much. And It's maybe more interesting than the vinegar version. Anyway, that's the story with that Carolina slaw.
We love that style and approach to it. And it falls very much in line with kind of our approach to making cooking easy, low barrier to entry, doing kind of really simple recipes that everybody can do and adapt, right? Based on what's hanging out in your house or what you have at the farmer's market this week or whatever you've got access to that needs used.
Right.
Which I think would have been the original point of fermentation, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was visiting a friend's family in Denmark a few years ago in the fall, and I was talking with their dad, and we decided we were going to go see what was growing out in the fields and make Danish kimchi out of it. And, you know, it wasn't like Korean kimchi, but it did have pepper in it. I think there was a lot of garlic. There was they have these cone-shaped cabbages in Northern Europe that are cool. They're easy to cut. And you know, there was carrots, there were some hot peppers, fresh hot pepper. Anyway, we made a great, you know, Danish kimchi, because it's really about what you have and what you can do where you are and what you have time to do, and what you personally enjoy. Like not everyone likes natto, so not everyone has to eat natto. Not everyone likes kombucha. Some people love kombucha, some people, you know, hate yogurt. I don't know. You don't have to eat everything that's fermented, but you know, if you can eat 3 or 4, I would say you're way ahead of the game, right?
Yeah. So we talk about fermentation originally would have been like a way of preserving food for the winter so that they had access to vegetables and nutrients. But also now modern research shows like all the amazing ways that it's so good for you. What is your favorite side of it or part of it?
My favorite part of fermenting, I kind of like the mad scientist part, where you do these things and then you leave things out on the counter and they change, and there's you know, there are invisible forces at work, and there are these taboos about leaving things out on the counter and, you know, letting the microbes take control of your food. And I like breaking those taboos, I think. And I like not just in fermentation, but I like surprising people and expanding their conceptual frame, or maybe I like shocking people a little bit sometimes. Anyway, fermentation is great for that. So I think that would have to be my, I think that's what appeals to me on a deep level about it. But of course, I also like eating food, and I like activities that combined technical skills with artistic skills, if you will. That's a little more glamorous than most of the fermenting I do. I mean, art is pushing it, but craft, I guess, right? There's you have to understand what you're doing, but then you also have to have some interesting idea if you want to do something new.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of cooking. So fermentation was like a natural fit for that of, wait, we can make it do this weird stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to agree that we kind of combine that art and science blend as well when we're trying to explain fermentation, that it's really like nerdy science stuff, but it's also there's a flair to it with the creative expression, and the way you explained what you love about it kind of made it sound a little counterculture too, a little flash of rebellion in there that's exciting to some of us.
Yeah, totally. And until a few years ago, like fermentation was in the US at least, was definitely like fringe. Like you were sort of what's the word I want for it? You were definitely counterculture. I think that's a good word if you're fermenting, because like who does that? But now it's so mainstream, there are articles about it everywhere, and it's like the new, cooking trend of 2022. And mainstream-ish food magazines have whole issues devoted to it, and so we all were ahead of the game. So good work on that. And
I agree.
yeah.
That's how Leslie and I kind of connected and bonded, was our love of fermentation. It was the way that you found your other weirdos, because not everyone was doing it. So
I was going to use that word. In the best way. Yeah. Yeah. And the community angle that you're talking about, like if you want to find some people who are thinking outside the box a little bit, or who are connected to other interesting, maybe alternative communities, something like that, fermenting people are a good shot. Like, you go to a fermentation festival, you're going to meet some interesting people, and who you maybe wouldn't meet at a, well, I don't know, never mind. I was it's a good place to meet people.
To clarify, we don't ferment people.
Right.
I don't know.
Although,
I was thinking we kind of do inside, eating
Well,
stuff, but doing stuff. All right.
we are mostly bacteria by some measure. I think by cell count, we're more than half. I've heard different numbers, but everyone agrees we're more than 50% bacterial cells within our skin.
Well, off topic, but I was just having a conversation yesterday about this new discovery that our cellular mitochondria is actually bacterial. So that adds a whole boost to the percentage of bacteria that we are, if you consider that aspect.
So it's like there are bacteria within each of our cells, is that?
That's the new hypothesis going around, that the mitochondria in our cell is actually like a foreign bacteria. So we're actually run by alien bacteria.
Right.
More than we thought.
Right. Interesting.
Which is all the more reason to eat the good ones that we want in our bodies, right?
Right. And to avoid antibacterial everything.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So, Alex, what do you wish more people understood about fermentation?
Well, let's see. I think people are afraid of it. They're afraid of like poisoning themselves and their friends and their family. And if you're making like sausage or cured meat or something, yeah, you want to be careful and make sure you're doing it in the official ways. And like, but fermenting vegetables and fruits is really very, very safe. And in fact, it's been said that it's safer than eating raw vegetables and fruits. The acids are protective, as folks know if they've been to cooking school or taken the Serve Safe certification. Making things acidic is one of the ways that you can preserve them, and that's one of the ones that fermentation relies on. So I guess to answer your question, fermenting is very safe. Don't be afraid. And it's very easy. It can be very easy. And that's why I don't want to point fingers, but a very famous restaurant came out with a fermentation book, and it's beautiful, and it has all these crazy recipes in it. And for somebody who hasn't fermented, if they pick up their book, they're gonna look at it. They're gonna say, wow, this is cool. I'm never gonna do this, right? I'm gonna rely on the experts to do this. I guess that's the other thing. Like, you don't have to rely on the experts to ferment for you. You can ferment yourself. You can buy fermented things if you want, and that's great. And you're supporting, good people much of the time. But you can do it yourself. It's not esoteric in any way. And people have been doing it for thousands, tens of thousands of years, probably thousands. So, it's not a big deal, I guess, right?
Yeah, we love that side of it, of just it's salt and cabbage, and you push it into a jar. Get real
Right.
fancy and throw it in a stand mixer, let it pack it for you, and then shove it in a jar. Like, it doesn't have to be difficult, but you can get really wild with it. And that's what I
Right.
tell when we're doing our classes. I tell them, bring back your project, we'll taste it together, because Leslie and I both, the first couple of things we fermented, we shoved in our fridge, and they got pushed to the back of the fridge. It's been there too long. Clearly, we should get rid of this, right? And psyched ourselves out of trying it because we had done it ourselves. And it doesn't have to be scary. We tell people it's really easy. The human body was kind of designed to know if this stuff was bad. So if you open it up and go, huh, probably don't eat it unless
Right.
it's not. Then you'll probably do that anyway, even if it's good. That is literally my rule in my class. But you've been playing with natto, right?
Yeah. So in the second edition of Real Food Fermentation, the book you showed, the new edition has a new cover, and silly me, I don't have one. Maybe I'll go get one if we want to take a moment at some point. I added some new sections, and one of them was on natto. Natto is a bacterial soy ferment that's popular in Japan. I think the national average is a couple of packages a week of natto, small packages. So people eat natto regularly, and it is the word in Japanese is neba neba for the texture of it, which translates sort of to slippery, maybe, but slippery is maybe a generous description of it. It is slimy the way okra is, but maybe a lot more so. It's not a texture that Americans in particular experience outside of okra. I mean, there's some other things maybe in Asia that have that, like there's this mountain yam that's also slippery like that. But so natto, you're saying like it has this texture, like why should we eat it? Well, it turns out that natto contains some compounds that nothing else does. Like one of them is this enzyme called nattokinase. And then it also has more vitamin K2 than like anything else, I think. And they when COVID happened, and Americans were busy buying all the toilet paper and hand sanitizer, in Japan everyone bought natto. Like the natto was the shelves were empty of natto, and natto has this reputation as this traditional health food, right? And there are all these articles saying, oh, look, natto, everyone bought natto. Isn't that cute? It's a traditional health food. But be clear that natto does not prevent COVID. And then about a year later, somebody did a study where they took some natto extract and put it in a petri dish or whatever with some COVID virus, and it killed the COVID virus. And so, right. So sometimes these traditional foods, actually have, qualities that have still not been explored by, modern reductive science. And, science doesn't know everything yet. And traditions exist for a reason. And if they killed people, they would become unpopular and go away. So I guess my point, which I'm taking a long time to get to, is, number one, eat natto. Just kidding. Not if you don't want to. But number two, traditional foods have health-giving qualities that many of us are too quick to dismiss as sort of mythology or, old wives' tales. That, it's a very condescending and misogynist term, like old wives wouldn't know anything. It's like, well, yes, they do. They know that you should eat natto, right? Or chicken soup when you're sick, something like that, right? Anyway, So natto is very, very interesting food with its own mythology. On my Instagram feed, which is Lacto Ferment, I did a project during COVID again to see how many different ways I could prepare natto to make it less um, 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 intimidating, I guess, to make it more appealing to people who think they don't like it. And so I called it 19 Days of Natto in honor of COVID-19. But then I just kept going. I think I got to like 28 or 29 different preparations, some of them tongue in cheek. But each thing that I photographed, I did eat afterwards. So none of them were just for show. So natto. So yeah, natto is in the new book. You can make it. You need to be able to hold it at 40 degrees Celsius, which is like 100 and a little bit Fahrenheit. Trying to do Celsius going forward. You need to hold it, incubate it basically for a day or so. I've done that in an Instant Pot. It's very easy. You can do it in a yogurt maker. You can try and do it in other things, but the temperature control is kind of important. So, there are a few toaster oven things with a dehydrator setting. And if it goes all the way down to 102 or something, that'll be good. But yeah. Anyway,
So
that's my natto story.
what's a good way to eat it for beginners? Since you
Um,
explored that.
Sure. Well, the classic preparation is some rice, some natto, some mustard, some, sweet soy sauce, some scallion snipped onto it, maybe a raw egg yolk. That's the traditional way, and you can see like the raw egg yolks are very healthy, and then but I think for beginners, I would put something like a stronger sauce on it, like gochujang, I would say is nice. Or I found that pairing it with something like okra takes away some of the shock. It's soybeans, so it is a bean. I've made natto nachos, and that works very well. There are some things you don't want to do with it. Like I tried mixing it in with grass-fed 100% beef hamburger, and that no, I don't recommend that, although everyone can try it for themselves. But yeah, so I'll go with natto nachos, maybe natspacho, so gazpacho with some natto in it. I think a strong acid, maybe this is where I'm getting like some kind of acid. Either you go all slime and add more okra, or something acidic will cut the because the usually when things are slippery, it's an alkaline situation. So yeah, and this gazpacho, if you like gazpacho, I would say natspacho is maybe a good one.
I love the names. I'm apt to try the funner names. So I love natto nachos and the natspacho sounds
well, like I said, in my Instagram Lacto Ferment, I have like a bunch of them. Not everyone's gonna want to do some of them, like the natto with Nutella and rainbow sprinkles on a cracker. Surprisingly, not so bad. I mean, I liked it. I would eat it again.
My introduction to natto was not as kind. I just got it straight up with chopsticks out of the jar, and I was like, was not ready.
Right. That's a lot. Yeah.
It's not a beginner ferment. It's not a beginner flavor.
Yeah. And it's not, it is a little trickier than some ferments, and you need to adapt it to the equipment you have, and like in practice you have to buy like a little foil envelope of spores from Japan. I mean, you can do it other ways, obviously, until 80 years ago, there was no little foil envelope of spores that you could buy. But it's natto isn't a good starting ferment either for eating or for making. However, the health properties are undeniable. So
what would you say is a good starting ferment for making or for eating?
I mean, I usually go with sauerkraut because it's so like you said it earlier, Lindsay, like cabbage, salt, chop, chop, squish, squish. It's very easy. It's I don't want to say it's 100% guaranteed because I have talked to people who have had sauerkraut go south, but it's pretty consistent. It's flexible. You can do a lot of things with it. You can eat it just on its own, obviously. You can put it on a sandwich, you can throw in some soup, you can throw in a stew, you can it
I
goes
eat mine on my eggs every morning. I do eggs and veggies, throw my sauerkraut right on top, because that's one of the questions everybody always asks in the courses or in the coaching. Like, okay, but now what do I do with it? Like, we made it, but now what? And I go, just put it on everything. And by the time I'm done with 6 weeks of me, they're like, I would never have done that, but it's so good.
You can puree it, make it into a salad dressing. I've made there's a Mexican drink called a michelada, which is it's like a Bloody Mary but with beer instead of vodka. You can make a sauerkraut michelada or kimchi michelada. Remember when I said I haven't ever done anything new, that somebody's always done everything before me? I'm not sure anyone has made a kimchi michelada before. I may have invented
that. Might be a new one.
Yeah, but
name it after yourself quick before someone else does.
call it the Alex michelada. Yeah, and a lot of ferments. Yeah, like if you find old sauerkraut like that's been sitting out or that's been sitting in the back of your fridge, worst case you throw it into some soup, or a stew, or the crunchy texture is nice, but not all sauerkraut's crunchy. If you're putting it on a sandwich, you don't want it to be too crunchy necessarily. So then there are things like preserved lemons. Like none of us live in the citrus belt, I don't think, but people who have lemon trees, like all of a sudden a couple of times a year there are all these lemons, and like there's only so many whiskey sours you can drink. And so what are you going to do with them? They don't last forever in the fridge. However, if you salt them and preserve them that way, they'll last years outside the fridge and they'll just get better. And then you can use them in your, you could use them in your drinks. They're a little salty, but you can use them in your tuna salad or with your fish or with your roasted chicken or with your vegetable, your portobello mushrooms, or in salty lemonade, which is a good summer, good alternative to Gatorade, very good alternative to Gatorade. Or anywhere you would use a lemon, you can use a preserved lemon. It's a little salty, but with your eggs. Or
you're making me hungry right now. I wish I could go raid a fermentation closet. So we kind of glossed over this. So for people who are really new to our community or beginners on this topic, can you guys, one of you, both of you, just outline like the bullet points of why fermentation is so good for us? Because we kind of focus on it being probiotic, but that's not the only health benefit. So what's the short list for why people should ferment?
Should we take turns?
Go for it. Let's do it.
Okay. You want to go first, or shall I?
No, I'll let you roll.
Okay. Well, it preserves your food. I mean, that's probably the main reason people started doing it. Well, that's a broad statement. I'll retract that statement. It preserves your food, though. If you live in a colder climate, you need a source of vitamin C in the winter, for instance. Otherwise, you'll get scurvy. And So you need to preserve your cabbage. That's why kimchi is popular in Korea. They need a vegetable in the winter, and cabbage is it. That's why sauerkraut's popular in Europe. That's so preserving food so that we can get our vitamins in the winter. Okay, that's mine.
Yeah, and then it adds nutrients that either weren't there or weren't available. So like takes, like you mentioned, maybe safer than your raw vegetables, up levels it and adds to it things that didn't exist even to begin with, or you couldn't have accessed to begin with.
Like extra B vitamins and vitamin K and all kinds of stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
extra C also, yeah. Makes things easier to eat. So like raw cabbage, the joke is that it gives everyone gas, right? It doesn't give everyone gas. But when you ferment your cabbage, it's like the bacteria are pre-digesting it for you. And a lot of the carbon dioxide that gets released when you're making the cabbage is carbon dioxide that isn't going to get released while it's in your intestine. And you get the head start on digesting. So not only are there more vitamins in it, but it is also pre-digested for you to some extent.
Which I love telling people. That and controlled spoilage as the definition are my favorite terms to use in a class where they're already trapped there and about to eat this thing.
Right.
Controlled
And,
spoilage and pre-digested gets you ready to eat.
and yeah, and pre-digested is important for grains also. I mean,
Mhm.
bread, like if you eat a mouthful of flour or just raw wheat berries, not great. So you need to process your grains in order. You're better off processing your grains in order to make them less toxic, make the nutrients more bioavailable, make it more delicious. Right. So that's another one.
Which also helps with legumes, nuts, and helps make dairy more digestible to many people. So,
All of that. Like all these foods, like nuts and seeds don't really want to be eaten. They want to, or seeds in particular, say they want to turn into plants, right? So they have these protection mechanisms. So you need to ferment them or soak them or do something to make them think that it's time to let their guard down. So
I like that method of describing it. Probably still
it makes like plant-based eating sound so much more like carnivorous. It's like
plants don't want to be eaten. I mean, well, fruit maybe want to be eaten, but what we call vegetables, they and leafy things, if there's a leafy plant and you eat all of its leaves, it's dead. So they have things in them that try to convince you not to eat them, like we're talking about. So but it's yeah, it's not as straightforward as like eating isn't straightforward. And the good news is that humans have been doing it for long enough that we have these traditions that exist for a reason. I mean, if you look at corn, this is a little bit off the fermentation topic, but not much. Traditionally, corn, before it was eaten, was processed, this process called nixtamalization. You treat it with this alkaline, either lime or ash or something, and that makes the nutrients in the corn more bioavailable. Now, if you don't do that, then you get rickets. It's a B deficiency, right? No, sorry, it's pellagra. All these awful things, right? So you get pellagra. So the indigenous people in the Americas had been eating corn using this process, nixtamalization, for centuries. And then the Europeans came along and said, oh, corn, let's grow some corn and eat corn. And they missed the memo about how you need to nixtamalize the corn before you eat it. And so they started getting these nutrient deficiencies, and it took centuries for them to figure it out. If they had just paid attention to the context in which the food is eaten and the traditions, they could have avoided a lot of health problems.
As so often is the case.
Go ahead. Yeah, you've been talking a lot about like this culture of it and the community of it. And that's actually been kind of my theme with a lot of our stuff lately, is just cooking in community and being connected to your food and to your community and to your culture and to your traditions and to other cultures and traditions and to other humans and also to the microbes, right? The whole web of connection that happens when you're cooking real food, when you're attached to your food systems, when you're growing food or involved in the process, and when you're fermenting, is a thing that's just really, really important and can go really deep, or can be really as simple as, hey, the reason most people probably think that they hate cooking is because they have to do it by themselves every night for a family that's mad about it, right? No wonder you hate it. It was always meant to be done in community. It was always meant to be done with traditions, with stories and community and time together. And so no wonder we think we hate it, because this isn't how it was supposed to be done. And so disconnecting from those traditions, disconnecting from those aspects of it, I think is part of maybe the more important side of what was lost, and that we're trying to bring back, of do this with other people, find your other weirdos, whatever that looks like. So I
Right.
love that.
Like living in community is another thing that's been lost in the last, well, again, I speak about the US because I know the most about it, but we used to live in larger family groupings, and now we don't anymore. We live with small numbers of adults and maybe some kids, and that small number of adults could be one or two, and one or two adults is not enough adults to preserve sanity and to properly take care of kids. I'm not judging anyone at all. That's the last thing I want to do, but I recognize how hard it is, and a lot of us know how hard it is for a small number of adults to raise any number of kids. And it's like, we're meant to do a lot of things in community, and cooking is one of them. So I don't know.
Yeah, so is fermentation, right? Because you want everybody's germs in there. We were somewhere yesterday, and this lady goes, oh, that's not sanitary, the samples are, and I just went, all the more reason. Hyper sanitize everything, and we need to be touching other people. We need to be touching other people's germs. We need to be coming into contact with other humans for our microbes, for our health, for our sanity.
Yeah, it's like taking your immune system to the gym. Honestly, you need those micro stressors so that it can be strong for when a macro stressor comes along.
Right. And we lost a lot of that during the early days of the pandemic, I think, because we were out of contact with other groups of people. And then once we started opening up, everyone started getting other contagious, like colds and flus and all this. And so
yeah, I keep hearing about how bad the flu season is this year, and I'm just like, well, did you not expect that to happen? Or
right.
But
and
go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was saying, and it's going to oscillate, and hopefully we'll get back to some kind of predictable steady state. But like you said, it's not surprising, and I don't know. Yeah, and I understand that for a lot of people it's hard, and people get sick, and if people are sick to start with, then it's hard, but it shouldn't be that surprising, I guess. Yeah.
And one of the things that hopefully we can get that back faster is by reintroducing all the bacteria that are supposed to be in your body and keeping you strong and keeping you healthy and doing it in community and being around other people and getting that going again.
Yeah, so we're at war on microbes.
Yeah, we're on Team Microbe.
Right. That's what people ask me, like, do you want some hand sanitizer? No, thank you. I grow germs on purpose.
Yeah, right. And yeah, and especially the antibacterial soap. I mean, the most notorious ingredient in antibacterial soap actually was banned eventually at long last by FDA or whoever it was, triclosan. But what are they putting in it now? I don't know. Soap is good. Soap washes them away, but doesn't kill them. And that way we're not like applying selective pressure on microbes to get more and more resistant to, yeah, I mean, there's a balance. I think the one thing I notice is that we in the West, if I may make a broad sweeping comment, we hear this idea about balance and we think it's a metaphor, but like in the case of microbes, it's a literal like balance. We are each of us and all of us together are an ecosystem of microbes, and if we do weird things that mess up the balance, like use antibacterial soap or spray everything down all the time, it's going to push things in some unknown direction, and then we'll get unknown results, like the super bugs we're seeing in hospitals. And like I'm not a public health expert, I don't know how to run hospitals and all of that, but I think we're doing something wrong. Like we need to fix the way
I
we're
have a
doing
degree
all
in
this.
public health, so I can approve your statement.
What I love is you said
Okay,
something
good,
about-
thank you.
You said fermentation is more diplomacy. And so actually we found there's a company that makes a probiotic sanitizer that's probiotic, and it's approved for hospital use and it's approved for school use, and nobody uses it, right? But they know that exists. There's an actual product line for it, where it's diplomatic. It's just giving us lots of the good guys that are out there looking out for us, and leaving some room for the neutral guys that aren't really causing anybody any problems, so that we maintain, like you're talking about, that balance, and the bad guys can't do anything crazy.
Yeah, I mean, is that Mother Earth? Is that the company you're talking about? No, there may
Nope,
be
this
more
is a
than
different one, but
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of ways to clean things without, yeah, I mean, like the yoga studio I go to, we spray down the mats afterwards with diluted tea tree oil, right? And you can use vinegar for cleaning things. Like you don't have to use, like the good rule is, if you're buying a cleaner and it says, harmful or fatal if swallowed, maybe you don't want it on your food surfaces. I mean, it doesn't take a degree in anything to make that leap, I don't think. It seems obvious to me. I don't know.
Or where your babies are touching. People want to clean things for their babies, but they're going to put something that's harmful if swallowed where the baby's touching instead.
Right. And like, all the baby products with antibacterial stuff like woven into the fibers of your baby clothes or whatever, they're going to be chewing on those things. Like, it doesn't compute. I mean, it's I guess it computes if you view it all through the lens of global capitalism, and companies make products that make money, and if there's nothing holding them back, they will push to the very edges of what regulations allow them to do, and then beyond, and then sometimes they get pulled back and sometimes they don't. But
Right.
That
was our rule. That was our rule in grad school. Anytime you're like, how is this legal? What is happening? Oh yeah, follow the money. In the US, the rule is follow the money. Why is this doing it? Follow the money.
Right. And we've some of us have accepted that global capitalism is the system we want. Some of us didn't get a vote on it. But like, given that that's where we're at now, we each have to make our own choices. We can't count on regulations to keep us as safe as possible or as healthy as possible. We really have to be experts. It's like, do you trust, I don't know, if you take your car to the garage and say, oh yeah, you guys are the experts, just do whatever you want to my car, and I'll pay you for it. It's like, probably not. You're probably want to know what they're doing and why, and like want to have some say in it. And the more you know about cars, the less likely you are to be screwed over by your auto mechanics, right? Not all auto mechanics are malicious, but some of them are, pragmatic. At least they need to make their money, and right. So in the government, I don't know what's my point. you need to become an expert at least a little bit on what you're putting into your own body. And it doesn't have to be difficult. Just like, I don't know. It's tough because I've been thinking about this stuff so much that there are things that are obvious to me, and I don't always know what's not obvious to other people. So yeah.
But definitely making your own food, fermenting your own food, understanding why those things matter, right? Like those are the easiest low barrier steps to changing that. Knowing where your food comes from. The more attached you are to where your food comes from, the more control you have over what you're putting in your body. And the better informed you can make your decisions, right?
Right. Yeah, we can't all be experts on everything, but if you're at least thinking about the choices that you're making and making them intentionally, then you're on the right path. So that's a big thing that Lindsay and I teach people, is just having that self-awareness and starting to think about these things, because that's really, and I think that you have the same sort of motto, is just to do the best you can with where you are. And that's what we teach people too, is just start being aware of the opportunities you have to make choices, and then you'll start making them more intentionally. And from there, it just leads you naturally to the better choices for yourself. And you just do what you're capable of doing. And like a big topic for me is conscious consumerism, which is kind of what you were talking about. Like you have to make those decisions for yourself instead of just blindly trusting governments or organizations to do it for you. But just being aware is the first step, just noticing all of the options that you have during the day to make a decision for yourself, and how many of them you're making passively instead of intentionally.
Yeah, no, totally. And like, start somewhere. Like salad dressing is a good place to start, right? Like you look at a lot of the salad dressing in the store and it's not so good. It has things in it like cottonseed oil and which is arguably not a food. And we won't go deep into the GMO question, but GMO canola, soy has all these things in it. And you're like, well, what could I do if I want to make my own salad dressing? And like, could that be a place for me to start changing my relationship to the food system? And it's a good one, right? You can use you can puree your sauerkraut, and you can use your old kombucha that got too sour and turned into vinegar. You can use quality oils like olive oil. You can use yogurt. Most of these things, well, not olive oil, a lot of these things I'm mentioning are fermented. So there's a pattern. Like, how can I get fermented food into my salad dressing, like yogurt or kefir, blue cheese? Yeah, it's every food choice is an opportunity. Like you said, Leslie, and conscious, I think, is a great eat consciously, buy consciously. Yeah, that's a good mantra, I think.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good segue into our big thematic question, which is, what would be your number one tip for helping people thrive through the holidays?
Helping people thrive through the holidays. I have to pick just one.
You don't have to. You could share a few if you want.
Okay. One of them is don't eat anything after, pick a time, I don't know, 9 p.m. because that's when the cookies happen for me. And it's like, you can eat your cookies, just that after 9 p.m. I'll put this in the first person. I stop making good choices about food. So just decide that there's a time, like you're not going to eat anything after 9, right? And maybe have an accountability partner in that if you have somebody nearby. So that's one. Try to have something fermented every day. It's really easy if you have like kombucha or sauerkraut. What else? I don't know. Don't get too drunk, because that will also lead to bad food choices, aside from not being great for your body. Yeah, I mean, that's a good
I think
story.
those are good tips.
Those are
Yeah.
good tips. I wanted to make a plug though, and if you want to, if you wanted to go grab your book, you could do
Yeah.
that real
Yeah.
quick. And I'll just make a plug for those of you watching that we've talked a lot in this group about stress, because that's one of the biggest things that kind of puts a cramp on our holiday joy. And eating something fermented every day is actually going to help combat that, because the fermented foods usually have extra B vitamins and things like that that actually work in your brain and in your body to mitigate the stress reaction and help your body deal with all that stress. So it's a good
Also,
mental health
pounding
tip.
sauerkraut, great way to get some anxiety out there.
Yes,
So not
physically,
going
it's
to-
also cathartic, right? So
neat
eating
bread.
something fermented every day is good mental health tip as well as physical health tip.
And we have loved Alex's book because it does kind of what we do of combining the art and the science and explains why and how and plays through it pretty well. So if it's just the fermentation side that you want to get into, Alex is a great guy for this as well. We love sharing knowledge with him. We're excited he was here. He also has, there we go.
New edition.
Yay!
Oh, it's blurring. You can see the broad
Super
colors,
secret
but it's getting the
There we go.
Okay, fine. Everyone gets to see my messy room, I guess. Hold on. There we go.
Yes.
Real Food Fermentation Revised and Expanded. This has the natto section that everyone's been waiting for.
nice.
Also a big section on sourdough. And sourdough isn't just about making bread. In fact, like I did a lot more sourdough things that didn't involve making bread, like sourdough crackers, really easy. When you're making sourdough, you have all this extra. In order to keep it going, you have to feed it, and then it gets sour, and you need to do something with your extra sourdough starter, and you can make crackers, and it's super easy. You can make porridge. It's even easier. Like there are all sorts of things you can do with sourdough besides making bread, which is less easy. Anyway, so I talk about natto and sourdough in there, and I also some of the more interesting parts of the book for me are the parts where I provide context for all the fermenting stuff. Like, one sauerkraut recipe isn't going to be that different from another one, but everyone who writes about sauerkraut comes to it from a slightly different angle, and I think that's the interesting part. My favorite part of the book is all the blah 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 in between the recipes. Then there's the other book, Kombucha, Kefir and Beyond, which focuses on beverages, with my co-author Raquel, and she and her business partner in Mexico, Galia, have a Oaxaca fermentation festival every year, which is amazing. And if anyone wants an excuse to go to Oaxaca in the fall, I can't think of a better one.
Let's put it on our list.
Lindsay, we got plans.
Are you gonna come?
Yeah, we'll look
Okay,
into
good.
it for sure. Like that sounds just right up our alley.
It's amazing. And okay, so those are the books. I'm going to blur the background again. And you had asked earlier about like an easy first ferment, and I'd said sauerkraut, but there's some that are even easier, like radishes. You can take whole radishes, throw them in salt water, close the lid, and they will become pickled radishes or fermented radishes. You don't even have to chop them up. You probably don't have to pull the gnarly tail off. You can just, you don't need a knife. Even easier. And then you can eat them whole, or you can shred them, or you can put them in your salad or whatever. So
Yeah, we
maybe
like talking about those as teenager ferments, right? Leslie has
Right.
well, hers is almost 21 now, but at the time I had a toddler, she had a teenager, and we're laughing about the pickled veggies or kombucha or sauerkraut. They're like teenagers. You have to check on them. You can't just let them completely go. But also, if you turn your back for a minute, it's probably not all going to burn to the ground. Whereas
Right.
something like kefir, pretty much a toddler. Needs
Right.
constant supervision.
Yeah, kefir is like a daily practice.
Mhm.
It's like doing yoga every morning. You do your kefir every morning or whatever. But yeah. And the preserved lemons are the ultimate, because then you can walk away and come back a year later and nothing's happened. I mean, they're just more fermented, but yeah.
So I have been pushing the boundaries of kefir. I got some amazing giant hearty milk kefir grains from Hillary Boynton and Chuck out in LA when I did a retreat with them. And so I don't want to let them die because it's like this amazing gift, but I'm also really not good at the infant ferments. So I am pushing the boundaries on how much they will tolerate. And so they're getting very independent. So each batch sits out for probably 3 or 4 days. It gets very potent,
Right.
but it's still within the realm of edible. And then they did hibernate for a while in refrigerator and came back to me when I brought them back out. So happy to report those successes with that. Although if you do want a more pleasant product, you will tend to them every day. I understand.
Right. First of all, let me say I love Hillary and Chuck. They're some of the best humans
Amazing.
on the face of the earth. Yeah, I mean, the challenge with kefir is if it gets too acidic, like the proteins will start to coagulate, and then you have to figure out what's kefir grain and what's sort of gloppy,
Chunky milk.
chunky milk. And I have like a nylon strainer, and I put it in there, and then I bang on the handle of the strainer, and that seems to do a good job, because otherwise kefir can be intimidating. If the liquid separates, then it can be a little bit hard to know what to do with it. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I try to get it before it gets too sour. The insurance policy, if you have some grains and you're worried about their future, if you're, going on a trip or something, is, give some of them to your friends. And then, like, if yours die, you can get some back from your friends. It's, not only is it generous to share, but it's also, it's, what do you call it? Mutual altruism, right? So
Right. It's like
it
a
works
high
out better
interest
for you
account.
also. And I'm giving away so many kombucha scobies right now, because they just I cannot give away kombucha starters fast enough. And I know if something happens to mine, which is unlikely because I have many of them in different places, that like I'll have something to fall back on. So that's part
That's
of
me
the
with the
beauty.
sourdough. I've sent it all over. My mom keeps it. Everyone has it. I'm like, I know. The couple times I've killed mine, I can get it back.
Yeah, it's amazing. It like forces you to be a good person.
There's that community thing again, right? So
However, kefir I've killed more of than everything else combined, I think. It still holds the title for my house of things I have killed the most times. Maybe when I don't have an actual toddler in the house, we'll come back to it.
Alex, do you want to let everybody know where they can find you to follow your future experiments, like your 19 days of natto and upcoming projects you have?
Yes. Should I put it in the chat? Does this show up?
Yeah, it should.
Tell us and we'll send it out to you.
Yeah.
Lacto ferment. Does that work? Let me see if that works. Yes, that works. So that is my Instagram handle, lacto ferment, which is lactic acid ferment. Doesn't necessarily have to do with dairy. And I also have a blog, which is feedmelikeyoumeinit.com.
Yeah, I love that one.
And I don't vlog that much. Oh, I have 2 events coming up. I'll be speaking at the Brine Brew and Southern Oregon Fermentation Festival, Brine Brew and Barrel, in Ashland, Oregon, on January 14th. Ashland is lovely. This fermentation festival was lovely when I went the last time and spoke. Highly recommended. I will also be speaking. Sorry, I'm having a computer. I'll also be speaking in August at Sanborn Mills in New Hampshire, where I'll be doing an all-day fermentation workshop, pretty deep dive. It's an amazing old active mill with a lot of parts of it that haven't changed in 100 or so years. Sanborn Mills, New Hampshire, maybe 2 hours north of Boston. So that'll be an all-day vegetables and fruit ferments, hands-on workshop. This is the first food event they're doing there. Up until now, they've mostly done crafts. They have a lot of weaving and wool spinning, and dyeing and all that. So this is different. And they encouraged me to arrange for other mixing bowls, because all their mixing bowls have been used for dyeing wool. So sounds like a good plan. Anyway.
Always exciting to go to a new venue.
Yeah. They have it's an amazing place. I encourage anyone to look for that. It's sanbornmills.org. I'll paste that in the yeah.
Those both sound like awesome events. So we have a West Coast option and an East Coast option for getting some live interaction.
Yeah, I'll get the link for the, so this is the Oregon Fermentation Fest.
Awesome. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I'm sure we could just talk for hours about all the socio-cultural, political, artistic components of this.
Yeah.
It's been so much fun just chatting with you in general. Do you have any final thought to share with our group?
Sure. Okay, if you've been waiting to ferment, stop waiting and do it. Especially, if you have a day or two off for the holidays, sounds like the perfect opportunity. And maybe you can make red and green sauerkraut for Christmas, if Christmas is your thing, or I don't know. Yeah. This is the month for fermenting.
Love it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. This has been super fun. We're glad that you joined us, and we look forward to seeing more from you.
It's really been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm always happy to find new fermenting comrades, and I very much enjoyed getting to know you all a little better this hour.
Very cool.
Perfect.
Take care.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.